Okay, I think we can start now. So, welcome everyone to Give Yourself Time to Sleep Painless System Monitoring Talk. First off, you're going to hear a lot today. Don't let that intimidate you. There's a lot of components, a lot of properties and information you'll be taking in. The painless part is when you set it up, it runs on its own. So, what do you want to get out of your monitoring system is not being on your computer checking that your servers and services are up all the time. A bit about me. So I'm Filip Suste. I'm a DevOps engineer at Infinum. We're an independent design and development agency based in Zagreb, Croatia. We have clients from all over the world, a lot of projects that we handle, and with agency type of work comes a specific set of problems. So there's not a lot of servers, but that's a lot of projects that need to be run, and a lot of external services that I need to communicate with and that my developers need to communicate with, and I need to check if everything's okay between them. So talking about monitoring. Who uses some kind of monitoring? Can I see hands? Okay. Shame on you if you don't. So when we started, we had Uptime Robot. That's basically a service that sends an HTTP ping, and if it receives 200, that's okay. It says everything's fine. And then we needed to monitor a bit more services. So we need to check if everything's okay with the database, if everything's okay with the Redis, if some other APIs are okay, if they haven't changed their schema, because external APIs does that. So sometimes we had drafted up a list of available monitoring tools then, and Prometheus was not really stable, and the community was a bit low. But we went through the list, so we wanted our own hosted monitoring tool. So we just eliminated those on the right, and we went through each and every one of them, checked their pros and cons. We found that Nagios and Isinga were a bit out of date. Isinga is okay, but Nagios was out of date. They had a higher learning curve for a less rewarding experience compared to some others. And while Monet was too basic, Zabbix was too complicated. So basically, we came to Sensu. First of all, let's see a bit of a spoiler. So this is our monitoring setup. It seems a lot, but it's really easy. Small components that do the right thing. So what is Sensu? Sensu is a monitoring framework that uses 4 components. So there's a Sensu server, there are Sensu clients, there's the Sensu API, and a dashboard where you can see the results through. So basically, this is the architecture from behind. So it uses the server and uses RabbitMQ as a default transport. You can change that, of course, to communicate with the clients, to publish and subscribe to the checks. Then it uses Redis for storage, not permanent, of course, but storage. So, and API to communicate with external services and dashboards. So these are the 4 components that Sensu uses. So talking about Sensu server, it's basically the brains behind the operation. You configure it with basic Ruby and JSON files. It's really easy. Not much to it. So if we just run this down, Okay, got it. Okay, so I'm gonna have to point it out like this too. So the checks is the keyword for all the checks that you want to have. The CPU status is the name of the check. The type can be either standard or metric. The difference between the two being the metric will fire off an event for some other type of handlers. The command, basically a script or a binary that needs to be executed. And you give him two flags, that's warning and critical. So the check will know and give you 1, 0, or 2, depending on how the check went. The interval is basically how many seconds between two checks are needed. The subscribers are a list of clients that listen for those types of checks. The handlers are which handlers are needed to tell you if something went bad. And the occurrences is basically the number of checks that need to be failure for Sensu to report it to you. So it's basically warning at 90%, critical at 95%, and that's it. The Sensu API is basically the glue for communication with external services and dashboards. So you can either run a check by pinging Sensu checks API, or get all your clients and results through the API through Uchiva. It has also aggregates API, events, stashes API, and so on. It's got really, really good documentation, and I'm not kidding about this. If you want to check it out, the barcode is here. This is basically the real power of Sensu. So it has easily programmable checks that you can do almost anything with, and through its API's RESTful JSON interface. Okay. So Uchiva is basically the Sensu dashboard that's open source. You can have a Sensu Enterprise dashboard if you pay for it. We don't. We think of it as good enough. It's basically a Django API, a Django app that uses the Sensu API. So this is an example of the Uchiva dashboard. God, that's huge. Okay, so these are the clients here. I've covered the IPs, but you can see the IPs. Those are the events that are occurring, the checks that are failing or something else that's happening for those clients. The versions, the data center, and when did that happen. So Uchiva prides itself to be a unified client, and you can see all the checks together, or one check specifically. I'll show you that a bit later. It's really powerful and simple. So if it can do basically everything you need. So if you need to silence a check, if you need to aggregate the results and make a summary of those checks, it's really simple to do so. So this is the rate check of one of our servers. Basically, it's one check that you can see how it's configured, its history through Redis, and when it was last issued, and so on. The Sensu client is basically a piece of software that subscribes to the RabbitMQ checks through what you defined it as a subscriber to. It can be standalone also. So if you have a server or in a bank or somewhere where nothing can get into, you can still report that and monitor that with Sensu. It has a simple configuration with advanced features. So, as I said, standalone pub sub, and it's basically used for communication between servers and clients. You can have one or many of those Sensu clients. So basically, it's like a namespace for a bunch of checks. Okay, so if I wanted to test an API, external API that's a black box to me, and I need to check the results against my JSON schema to see if the API changed or not. You can do that, namespace it with, and create a client that's basically for that, and it will appear as, I don't know, my awesome app API, and signal you exactly what check didn't pass or did pass. So these are all handled through RabbitMQ or whatever else transport you got. So again, the architecture before we go any further. As you can see, so the Sensu clients are communicating to the RabbitMQ that Sensu server published its checks to. Sensu server then gets the results and stores them into Redis, and you can use Uchiva through Sensu API to get those results out of Redis. So next thing we need is a bit of graphing. So alerts are all fine, but when you get an alert that your disk is up, it's already too late. So you need to monitor that accordingly and make sure that doesn't happen before you hit the roof. So we chose Graphite because, well, it goes really well with Sensu. So you just get the Sensu relay, and that's basically like 3 lines of code to pipe all your metrics into Carbon. Carbon is a thing from Graphite that fetches those results and stores them into Whisper. Whisper is the database, and Grafana is the view layer, or the app through which you will see the graphs. So this is Graphite's slogan. I agree with it completely. So let's go to the process again. You get your checks done with Sensu. You then relay them to Carbon, into Carbon through Sensu relay. So that's the picture again here. Then on Carbon, you got your Carbon cache, your aggregation and relays. So Carbon cache is a Python script that basically aggregates results from Sensu relay and then writes them into the Whisper database. Aggregation and relay are another 2 Carbon scripts. I didn't mention them because we don't use them. Basically, those are if you want, if you have a ton of checks that you need to save really fast. So we haven't hit the roof. Like, it's about 10% usage currently with 30 servers and 2,000 checks per minute. So it's really powerful. So you configure it just the way you like it. So we're talking here about data retention. So Carbon, when he gets the checks from the Sensu relay, he creates data points. Data points which he writes to the Whisper database. And you can create a lot of data retention points that suit your needs. So you can have 10-second data points for a day, a minute worth of data points for 7 days, and then 10 minutes worth of data points for a year. It's all stored in the Whisper database. Since you have all these data retention pairs that are fixed, it has a fixed size, so don't let that worry you if you're looking why isn't anything coming into my Whisper database. Everything is the same size, the files are just updated, but they don't seem any bigger. And basically the Whisper database is really easy to configure. It has a really small set of attributes. You can just leave it as is when you install it defaultly. It also has lots of tools to get you started. So like Whisper create, dump, fetch, info, resize, update, or set aggregation method. Then there's the data aggregation in Whisper is a bit unique. So when you're dealing with metrics, you have to have some aggregation over your data points. And since the update came like a month and a half ago, since we didn't have configuration files, I deleted them accidentally because everything was running okay by default. Whisper database again replenished the default configuration files and ran in default mode, which meant half of the data points in a data period needed to be valid or non-null for it to give you a result when you queried it. So that caused me a week and a half of lost metrics. So I didn't see anything on Grafana, but it was actually there. I was just not querying it that good. So a bit about Grafana. It unfortunately relies on Graphite Web. That's the API it uses to query the Whisper database. It has really beautiful metrics and graphing. So this is what it looks like. It's, again, easy to set up. It took me like 10 minutes to get this running. You can see you can have multiple metrics on one table, or I don't know, whatever you want, basically you can do with it. It has support for templating. So if you get a bunch of metrics from a bunch of servers, you don't need to make a lot of dashboards. You make one dashboard and configure templates like here. So you don't need to repeat yourself even if in DevOps. It has multi-user support if you want to give your clients access to your Grafana. For us, that was particularly useful because, as I said, we have a lot of clients and they want to see some metrics that if we say we created the metric system for them and we're monitoring their servers, they want to see it, and this is the way to do it. Since Grafana 4.0, it has alerts. So basically what I said was you want to know when your disk will run out. These alerts will get you there. So they'll send you an email when you set the threshold, and when you see like an upping graph, so the graph is going up rapidly, Grafana will alert you about that too. It has kiosk and playlist mode since Grafana 4.0, so You can even stick it up on a wall and let everyone in the firm see how great your servers are doing. And to round it up, to round the whole thing up, we need centralized logging. So who here has centralized logging? Who has tried that out? Okay, I see a few hands. This is really great. So basically, when we saw the opportunity from one of our other clients, we said we have to have that, and we had three to four demands from it. So we needed to have everything in one place. We needed to be able to search through those logs and make charts, because hey, everyone loves charts. And we really wanted an easy to use front end, because no one likes to go through Perl regexes or whatnot. So when we put that on the table, so again, we didn't go with a paid solution, a hosted solution. We go to a self-hosted solution. And between Elk and Graylog, we chose Graylog. Since Elk is the industry standard, I know, but we really got more from Graylog, especially for the interface part. So all of our developers could query the logs easily and get some useful information out of them without us being there for them. So what is Graylog? In Elk, Logstash pipes directly to its contents to Elasticsearch, and Graylog did some things differently. So log sources are piped to the Graylog server, and then you can get them through pipelines and different inputs, and merge the data or edit the data before it gets saved into Elasticsearch, and that's a really nifty feature. And then you can view it or pipe it again into another system. So this is what it looks like. This is not really a bunch of messages per second, as you can see right there, but it's really useful. This is a stream view of one of our apps. Graylog has Gulf, which is Graylog extended log format, which is really easy to use to read, and basically all the languages adopted it to format their logs into it. So you're not gonna have a problem with formatting your logs the way Graylog is used to. You can define multiple inputs for your data. You can extract them with extractors. So getting those fields out of the logs is really important because of quick values, something I'll get to a bit later. You can then store them into indexes. Indexes is a bit quirky at the moment, but they're working it out. So you can have maximum of one index per Graylog server. That means no different retention periods for now for different kinds of logs. Logs can be then grouped into streams, and this is again really useful for agencies' work because this is what it looks like. You can set up users and groups to view only streams, so you get that isolation between your clients, so they don't see everything on your infrastructure. It has simple and advanced search. So as much as developers don't really like regexes, we DevOps do. So we can still query it, query our logs through advanced search, or we can set up easily dashboards. This is something like it used to. So when a developer comes to me and asks me how much is the percentage of users going to the German API of my app, I just sit with them, show them this, and they're like, wow, I can see that like in an instant now. That's great. So you parse the language out with an extractor, you click on the language, and you get those quick values for the period you're looking for. It has notifications and alarms. So if you can't do something through Sensu or Grafana, which I think is a bit overreaction, you can do that through Graylog. So if anything comes through your logs and needs your attention, you can get a mail or get a Slack via webhook. As I said, it has granular user and group management. So isolating the streams or inputs, setting up groups of people that can view different streams is really, really easy. Okay, so let's review. We have our Sensu clients that pipe the data and the checks we need to into RabbitMQ. We then have our Sensu server that stores that into Redis. We use the Sensu API to show our checks on Achieva. And on the Carbon side, on the graphing side, we use Sensu Relay to get our data from the Sensu server to Carbon, save it into Whisper, and then query it through Grafana. And for the Graylog bit, so we pipe and edit our data into the Graylog server, which saves it to Elasticsearch, and then we can query it and manipulate it to the Graylog web interface, or pipe it again to another system. So the point of my talk was not to show my shiny setup, but to say anything that lets you sleep at night is good monitoring. So you want from your monitoring to get an alert when something goes down and when it comes back up again. You need to be able to react to it fast. You need to isolate the problem and get it resolved quickly. That's it from me. Please rate me on Shadow, and feel free to ping me on Twitter or catch me outside. Are there any questions?
How long did it took you to set this all up?
So the question is, how long did it take me to set it all up? So first time, I'm not gonna lie, it took me 3 days. The second time, I was doing this last Saturday for another setup like this. It took me 4 hours when I kind of grasped the which components react with which ones, communicate, and how. It's really not that hard to do. Yeah. So you're talking about Sensu, Grafana, or in Orville. So Sensu has a great way of aggregating those pings. So it won't ping you unless something changed, which is great, which is probably the way all monitoring alerts should be. And you can also set with, I didn't mention here, you can also set up remediation. So if I don't go to my Uchiwa panel and say, okay, I fixed it, Sensu will try to remediate the problem by running a script I made that will just like reboot Nginx or something and see if that fixed. If that didn't fix the problem, send me another ping. Anyone else? Yes? We have Sensu client, yes. Greylog doesn't have a client. You just pipe your logs through your application. So since we're a Rails shop, we use semantic logger, I think. Semantic logger, which transforms Rails logs that would usually end up in passenger logs and just sends them to our Gulf endpoint. And for the Sensu, yes, you do need to have a Sensu client on the server. It's not that hard to install it, and it's definitely not hard to configure it. So you just if you don't have any checks on that are custom, you just install it on the server. You set up the client so it would subscribe to the topics like CPU, web servers, and database. And when the Sensu server pushes those kinds of checks, it can immediately react and send the results back. Yeah, so the application, when it receives a request, it goes exactly into Rails logger, and then Rails logger is overridden by semantic logger, which just shoots it out on a Gulf output or the Gulf endpoint of our Graylog server. Okay, is that it? Okay, thank you for being here, and I'll see you outside for drinks.